As we move to the other war, well, the one between Israel and Hamas, intense fighting is said to be going on in southern Gaza, where Israeli forces have been bombarding since last night. Hamas officials say more than 200 Palestinians have been killed in the strip within this time. In the West Bank, the IDF says it killed 4 Palestinian militants in a counter-terrorism operation. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli troops killed 4 Palestinians during what they said was a counter-terrorism raid near Kilkia. The Israeli War Cabinet and its Security Cabinet will be meeting in Tel Aviv tonight to discuss plans for the day after the war in Gaza. The U.S., Israel's closest ally, has been pushing for a clear plan on who will govern Gaza after the war so that the Israeli military does not remain indefinitely in the territory. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected in the Middle East this week. In the meantime, Israel intends to appear before the International Court of Justice to contest South Africa's allegations of genocide over the war in Gaza. South Africa's application states that the acts and admissions by Israel are genocidal in character because they are intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial and ethnic groups. In a related development, the Israeli military has announced the plans to pull back some of its combat troops from the Gaza Strip as a temporary measure in the war. It will be the first significant pullback of troops since the war began in October. In a statement released on Monday, the Israeli military says 5 brigades were taken out of the enclave for training and for rest. It's not clear whether the decision means the war is entering a new phase. Israeli officials have said they would wage the war in 3 main stages. The first was intense shelling to clear access routes for ground forces and encourage civilians to evacuate. The second was the invasion of the Gaza Strip that began on October 27. And the war against Hamas is being fought not just in Gaza, but Israeli forces are targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon. On Sunday, they released a video showing airstrikes on targets in Lebanon, a location that dates in the video have not been verified, but Hezbollah has been trading fire with Israel at the border since the October 7 attacks on Israel. That attack ignited a conflict that has drawn in the heavily armed group and other Iran-aligned factions across the Middle East. The violence has, however, to a large extent been contained to areas at the border shaped by what observers have called unwritten rules of engagement between adversaries that have long threatened each other with catastrophic damage in the event of war. Staying in Israel but away from the war, the Supreme Court on Monday struck down a highly disputed law passed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing government that rolled back some of the High Court's power and sparked nationwide protests. The law was part of a broader judicial overhaul proposed by Mr. Netanyahu and his coalition of religious and nationalist partners, which caused a deep rift in Israel and concern over the country's democratic principles among Western allies. Monday's court decision again captured headlines in Israel, where news coverage has been dominated by war since Hamas carried out a deadly rampage in southern Israel on October 7. The new legislation brought before the court had removed one, but not all, of the tools the Supreme Court has for quashing government and ministers' decisions. It took away the court's ability to avoid such decisions that it deemed unreasonable. 8 of 15 judges ruled in favor of nullifying the law. That's according to court papers. The Supreme Court, in a summary of its decision, said the majority of judges ruled to strike down the law because it would severely damage Israel's democracy. And people in Jerusalem are a bit divided on the issue of the Supreme Court rejecting the highly disputed law. While some thought it was a good move, others decided against it.
First of all, I think that the High Court of Justice needs to respect the decisions made by the government that was democratically elected, and that they have no reason to interfere.
I'm very happy about the decision because, to me, it means that democracy is still intact and that the government represents all of the people, not just the people who won yesterday's election. And so I think it restores some checks and balances to our government, which hopefully will bring peace, not just externally, but also internally.
And I think here in Israel, there's a very serious problem because the nature of what the state is going to be is still an open question. This decision by the Supreme Court that they just passed is a prelude to a tremendous civil war that's going to take place here, because the question of who usurps power in a country without a constitution is very serious.